Diolch am ymuno ni yng Nghanadledd Cenedlaethol Seren 2018. Ewch yn bellach. Thank you for joining us in the Seren National Conference 2018, Above and Beyond. Dyma sesiwn. This is session Sgiliau Astudio Effeithiol. Effective study skills.
Okay guys, I'm going to get going if that's okay. My name's Lucy, for those who haven't met me already. I work for the University of East Anglia, which is right on the other side of the UK in Norwich. For those of you that have been to see me today, you've probably talked to me about psychology, medicine, possibly English, literature and creative writing. Generally, I've been working for the university for about, nearly 10 years probably now. Supporting young people making their option choices for university and looking at UEA. So I get to come and talk to you about study skills and what the differences are at the moment between college and first year university. I've got loads of hints and tips from our students and our advisors as we work our way through the programme, and we're just going to sort of fill you with loads of different hints and tips and information from our team and from our university. Does that sound okay? Yeah, it's after lunch and it's very warm in here, so hopefully we'll get some stuff done that you're happy with. Right, my aim for the day is for you guys to all write 1 to 3 in your notebooks or on your phones. All right? 3 points. At the end of the session or throughout the session, can you note down anything new, any hint and tip that you've heard me talk about in those 1 to 3? Okay? Anything at all that makes you go, oh, didn't know that. All right, that's all I'm asking you to do, generally, over the course of this session, is just to pick up those hints and tips and what we're working with. Does that all sound okay? Yeah. It's warm, it's after lunch, I won't pick on you too much. We'll give it a go. Right, so let's start with some of the skills that we'll be looking at. Research is the top one. I don't know why this particular one does this every time. In fact, I'm probably using the wrong clicker. Let's give this one a go. It just looks like that. There we go. Right, research. Other skills that we're going to talk about. So we're going to look at hints and tips from our students, what it's like to be an independent learner, looking at some of the practices that you can get involved in now at college or at sixth form, the time management modules that we use to help our students build on their professional experience, and effective reading. So let's start off, I'm still going the wrong way with this clicker, with independent learning. Okay, so independent learning, you're probably already participating in it quite a lot, but independent learning is what our students refer to as any additional work that they have to do generally in their own time. So different teaching timetables at universities range from as little as 6 hours teaching time all the way up to 30 plus hours of teaching time a week. And it depends what courses you're studying as to which way and which end of the spectrum you're likely to be on. Some people prefer to do lots of independent learning, so they're generating their own information, own resources, own research. Others prefer lots more teaching time, so they're getting that experience from individuals and they're getting the information from lecturers and tutors as they work their way through. So if we think of a typical college day, it might look something like this. Anybody nodding at me to say this is generally right? Your 4 A-level subjects, possibly little pockets of independent study because you're trying to squeeze them in during your college day so that when you go home, you don't have to do them or don't have to do quite so much. Maybe working on, additional programs, learning skills, maybe getting involved in some enrichment activities as well. Okay, does that all make sense? Generally looks something like that. So it's normally quite busy for you guys. Can you put your hands up for me if you tend to work more in the evening on additional projects or homework and that sort of thing? Who works at weekends? Who tries to fit it all in the school-college day? Okay. It really depends. And a lot of what we're talking about is making your programs bespoke to you, making you find the right information and the right program and format for you. So when a university student is given their timetable, it could look something like this. So a couple of hours every morning, okay, teaching, and then the rest of the afternoon might be free. So let's explain this so that you know what we're talking about. A lecture is something like this, where someone stood at the front giving you a talk, teaching you some information, some knowledge, Okay, it could be that that's then followed up with a seminar, if you've heard us talk about seminars, or a tutorial. They tend to be pretty similar. Tutorials often are a little bit more hands-on, but seminars are a group discussion, generally with 10 or 15 of your classmates, looking at a particular problem or piece of information. So just to highlight that structure, you know, you're finding out the information from your lecturers, you're getting a big boost of information and knowledge at the start of the week, and then you might be working with your seminar group, picking that piece of information apart and seeing what you've learned from that particular task or piece of information. When it comes to our medical students, their diaries are a little bit fuller, but you might be quite surprised how many gaps at the moment they've got. So a typical first-year medical student might be looking at a lecture program like this, might be looking at some consultation sessions, might be looking at an anatomy session as part of their week, okay? But the things to point out to you are what we call these PBL caseload sessions. So each week, often, a medical student is given a PBL, a problem-based learning activity. They then have to work with a group of their peers across the whole of the week and bring it to the session on the Friday, any knowledge that they've picked up and gained, and share it with the rest of their group. So it could be a case study of a particular patient, it could be a scenario, but they have to, over the course of that week, meet up, share some information, and then provide the notes on the Friday morning. So very quickly, a lot of this white space is filled with meeting up with their group for their problem-based learning. It could also be that they've got a piece of coursework due in. They've got to fit that in too. And they may have to do rotational placement meetings that week. They might have to fit into that week too. So all of a sudden, that white week is becoming very much an orange block week. This particular slide came from a student who runs a blog called Life of a Medic, which is a student at Manchester University. So if any of you are interested in medicine, it might be worth having a look at her blog and looking at how she's applied for medicine and what she's had to do. So how do they fit all those blocks in together? What techniques do they use? And how do they pick up hints and tips from other people? So to start with, they probably start out with a block like this, which I'm sure you've all seen before. General table, putting in those blocks and timetabling extra information in. As you can see, I've put in this one a day starting at 8 and finishing at 9. But we all know that every student is different. And although we don't encourage it, some students are writing that essay at 3 a.m. in the morning because that's when they feel their brain is most free and available to write the piece of writing that they're writing. You know, so utilising things like university libraries, which are open 24/7 in quite a lot of cases, might be the way that they're getting their work done. So having a look and building your own timetable and making sure you've got the right gaps. You might be a late riser. It might be worth not doing anything before 11 o'clock because actually you prefer to be in bed in the morning and you're a night owl. It might be the other way around. You'd rather be up at 5 a.m. and in bed early. It depends what you're looking to do. So timetabling something that fits you is probably where most of our students start. From there, they tend to look at what they're going to fill those blocks of work time with. And Jo talks regularly about how she downloads weekly to-do lists or even daily to-do lists to fill up her time and block it all in. That then means that she can put her topics in order. Often, the harder bit is prioritising what comes first. Generally, most of our students look at their deadlines as the start of where they need to be and what they prioritise each week, okay? But from there, it could be that one project needs prioritising because you've got a lot of reading to do. One needs prioritising because you've got to meet with a group of people who are only available on a Thursday afternoon between 6 and 8. You've got to find that balance across your first year and on your continuation through university to make sure you're getting the right pieces of information. Okay. So, moving on from time management, we're going to talk a little bit about effective reading. Now, what we mean by effective reading is utilising your time and building on your reading habits. So, quite a lot of our students have to, as part of their course, read core texts. So, I'm going to give you some examples of those. Okay. On top of that, they might be doing further reading on a particular subject. And they've got to fit that in those white bits of their timetable to make sure they've got it all done, often on a weekly basis. So there may be set reading each week over the course of a semester or a term to make sure that they're hitting the topics each week for their seminars and lectures. So when it comes to looking at text, quite often to start with, lecturers will look at books and ebooks. Okay, it's always a good place to start for research. Generally, you've got those specialised books available to you that will be more in-depth. Reference books, including things like encyclopedias, might be there to help you and top up your vocabulary if you're looking up something in particular. Or ebooks are often now used an awful lot more. So some of our students download their textbooks straight onto things like Kindles to make sure that they've got all the textbooks that they need to hand. So when we're working through, generally we're looking at different reading lists. So for example, as I said before, a student over the course of a semester will have to do a number of modules. Each module will have a project or poster or presentation at the end of it. So just something that sums up what they've been working on. They're broken down into credits, so often you get a 20 credit module, for example, and that will give you however many hours of teaching, maybe 2 hours of teaching a week, and then you have to build up each week on a scale to make sure that you're covering all the topics. This is the reading list, the compulsory reading list, so the core reading for our children's literature module. I think it was last year. So, as you can see, there's lots of reading to do. However, can you put your hand up if you've read one of these texts already? Okay. Can you leave your hand up if you've read 2? 3? Okay. So you can see, if it's something that you're interested in, or something in this case that you've possibly studied since you were little, okay, it may be that the reading list just needs a refresher. It could be that you're just topping up an independent text, just making sure you know all the key points about it, and then bring it in for discussion. There were another probably dozen books on this particular reading list that were further reading. So you could pick those books up as well to make sure you've got everything covered, but it's not compulsory. These are the ones you definitely have to have read for the modules. So comparing it with something like physiotherapy, there's only, 7 books on this list? Okay, and it could be that there are only specific sections of these books, but once again, they're having to read and make sure they've got it covered. How many of you have read any of these texts? Yeah, okay. So, walking into the classroom when you start, you've got a couple of options. At the start of term, you'll be released your reading list. It could be that you look into some of it before you've even started, especially if there's one prime text that you're going to do lots of different sections of. If not, you've got the opportunity over the course of the weeks to build that reading time in. And a lot of our students incentivise their reading to make sure that they are completing it. So that could be, for example, putting a Star Mix jelly teddy on the corner of each page, so once they get to the end of that page, that Star Mix is theirs. It could be, I've got to get an hour's worth of reading done, and then I get an hour's worth of Xbox free time. All right. They often talk to us about how they've incentivized their reading just to get it done. Okay. But it's making sure you've got the right information to be able to sit in that lecture or seminar and understand everything that's being thrown at you. Okay. Other forms of reading and additional research that you can be involved in. A lot of university lecturers will look up things like journals. So journals tend to be like a magazine. There are lots of different articles put into one journal together. Quite often they're things like National Geographic, so lots of different articles on different subjects, but compiled into one monthly edition. Having a look for those may get you additional reading on topics that you are trying to find out about. So it could be someone's only written 3 or 4 pages of an article, or it could be someone's written a whole book. But that way you're getting a new perspective on the topics that you're covering. So it's well worth looking up journals and articles. and quite often you can find those in university libraries. Our university library is access to everybody, so you can come and get a day pass and have a look and do research at the university library. It could be that the articles are online, so you can utilise that article using, I don't know, for example, the Times newspaper's website. So you can find out that first-hand opinion of the situation, okay? So finding those new resources is probably a good way to find out a little bit more about a topic. When it comes to reading, you'll also be looking to get that effectively read. So for example, with a journal article, you might read the abstract, then look at the introductory paragraph, then read the final paragraph. You might not need to read the whole text. With a book, you might look at the contents page to find the right chapters that are relevant, and then use, for example, the first and last paragraphs of that chapter to get an idea of what's going to be said in that chapter to make sure you are covering the right thing. So when it comes to finding that, one of our students found this really lovely resource. Can I just check, can you read that at the back? Is it really hard? Okay, if any of you want to move forward while we do this activity, I'm more than happy, because I'm going to give you 2 or 3 minutes to look through this. This is the contents page of the Globalization of World Politics and Introduction to International Relations. Okay, can you find one chapter or section to cover each of those topics on the left-hand side for me? Okay, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to do that. Is that all right? Good, muttering's going on. Okay, so can we go through some of these? Would that be all right? Okay. So if you were looking at this contents page and you were looking for the role of the UN, is there a particular chapter that you might look at? Chapter 18. Yeah, really nice example, called the United Nations. That's what it says on the tin. What about the Cold War? Yep, chapter 4, From the Cold War to the War on Terror. The role of women in politics. Yeah, I'd use 15. Gender in world politics. Okay, so what about the war on terror? 4. Yep. Totally use it again. There's no reason why you can't reuse a chapter, all right, just because it's got 2 different headings in it. What about international security? Oh, heard 2 different numbers there. 13. Was there another one? No, we're going to go with 13. International and global security. What about globalization and culture? Yeah. International ethics. What about this one right at the bottom? I don't know if some of you can see that one. Chapter 19 is on transnational actors and the international organizations in global politics. So it could be looking at culture and theatre, for all we know. Right? It could be that you can't find it in this textbook. So it's well worth seeing if all the topics are covered in the text that you're picking up. What about globalization and the political community? Yeah, chapter 1, right back to the beginning. Okay, so can you see how quickly you can pick up information just from a contents page, looking at the key headings that you are looking to research? Okay, so it can be not just opening everything up. You can find your topics really quickly and hit just certain areas of the textbook if you need to. Okay, so let's move on from here. Other resources that our students have highlighted that they use quite often are e-resources. How many of you would say that you use the internet more than you use textbooks at the moment when you're researching your projects? Yeah, we're seeing it more and more, and we completely understand it's a mine of amazing information. And quite often you can find out who wrote the original pieces as well, because the references are right there. I'll show you an example of that shortly. It could be that you're looking at news articles. It could be that you're looking at vlogs or blogs. It could be that you're using YouTube. It could be that you're using Facebook and so on, because there's been a poll that you find really interesting on Facebook, and loads of people have responded to it. It could be that you're looking at primary evidence, so finding out that information yourself. and finding that information yourself using Twitter, using Instagram polls, Snapchat messages might be the quickest way of you finding out a quick straw poll of a particular subject. Anything can be used as a resource for your research, but you do need to check how reliable it is. So, for example, how many of you would use this as a reliable resource? Why not? Anyone can edit with Wikipedia, yeah? Okay, so you can totally edit it any time. However, one way of making it slightly more credible might be looking at the referencing at the bottom of the web page. Each one of these texts or quotes is a book that was used to write the article underneath. Okay, so maybe looking in the books at the bottom of the list might find you that fact that you need that Wikipedia didn't have because you couldn't make it credible. So having a look at referencing and the text that people used might be a really good way of making your resource credible as you're working through. Okay? I'm going to park back onto the libraries. This is one of the guys in our library. It's a nice picture. I put it up anyway. Okay? 24-hour libraries at universities, public libraries, college libraries. How many of you have probably used them in the last, let's go with the last year, to find out any referencing information? Okay. They're there. We want to keep them open. So please go and use them and find the information. A lot of our students found that perhaps they used it in their first year. They weren't so much using it in their second year. But a lot of my third year students are now definitely in the library looking up the resources for their dissertation and finding those credible loops. So if you've already got that resource and that skill tacked down because you're already using it to find references and information for your research projects and things that you're looking at in your courses, then you're already a step ahead of where they are in their third year. Okay. One of our graduates talked to us a little bit about what helped her get through reading and what helped her look at where she was. So sometimes if you're not quite sure on a topic, reading from an additional reading list can show another perspective. So, for example, if you're researching stuff now, you could look at the reading lists on university websites around a particular topic. You know, for example, criminal law. So looking at what the university students are reading might find you your text if you're working on a project now. Okay? It could also be that you have been set a core list and the additional reading is just there to top it up. But there might be one particular chapter in a book, whereas it's only one chapter, but the team have said to you, if you read this, it will give you really good insight. So having a look at additional reading is always really helpful. Okay, so let's talk about research and how much our students research through their projects and what they need to work on throughout their research time. Okay. So the reason they look at research in particular is generally to get a better understanding of their topic to start with. It could then be they're looking to identify a gap in the research market, so something that's missing and they need to find a particular piece of information on it. It could be that they're looking to support their own research projects and give evidence points as they work their way through. From there, what a lot of our students do, and I think my clicker's possibly not going to work, okay, is they'll look at a title. So let's look at this title, for example. Which is the most effective parody of the horror film genre, Shaun of the Dead or Scary Movie? So can I have a hands up for those of you who've seen Shaun of the Dead? Okay, and for those of you who've seen Scary Movie, I thought Scary Movie might be a little bit less. Okay. If you had to choose which one is a good parody of a horror film, who would choose Shaun of the Dead? Okay. Who would choose Scary Movie? Who knows what I mean by parody? Probably ought to check that. Okay. So a parody is something that looks at something and is a similar form of it, looking at particular elements quite often. Okay. So the initial aim that the students came up with from this question was to see which is a more effective parody. Okay, so that was their aim they started with. They then looked at the ethics behind the project. Is there anything that could cause concern? And they were slightly worried that some people might be distressed by some of the content of the films. So they've put that in as an ethical dilemma that might be included. The next thing they've done is look at the format they've been given by the lecturer. So in this case, they've been asked to do a dissertation or an extended essay on that particular subject. So they need to collate all that information into an essay. Sometimes it's a presentation, sometimes it's a case study, sometimes it might just be a survey that they're looking for people to complete. So making sure you've got the right format pinned down is really helpful. The resources they've suggested they'll use will be academic journals, reviews of the films, and the films themselves. Is there anything else that you can think of that they could use? Not off the top of your heads. Okay. Everybody's different, all right? So that might be your place of start. From there, they've then looked at the research methods that they're going to use. For primary research, they're going to interview people who have watched them, okay? So they're not just going to take a show of hands like I just did. They're going to actually interview people and see what their opinions were. As their secondary research, they're going to watch the films and read other people's reviews. So primary, looking at first-hand data, secondary, looking at other people's opinions and secondary data, okay? So that's how they've broken down their project to make sure they're covering anything. It's then, at this point, the students have gone on to go, actually, we need to clarify our aim a little bit more. So actually, they're going to explore the parody of horror to start with. Okay, so that's two aims that they're going to cover in their research project. All right, and that's quite often how it works. As you work through a project, dissertation or essay, you'll find that you'll start writing and an extra aim may come up. So it's worth having a look and seeing what comes up next. And in this case, their hypothesis or their theory is that Shaun of the Dead is more effective. So for those of you who said that, that's what this research project was going to do. Okay. Can you see how they've broken each piece down and made it coherent and made a project plan from it? So they've made sure that their research has a theme running through it as you work through the program. Okay, let's see if I can get this to work again. Okay. So how they went about their research was very clear. When it comes to research, our students use lots of different formats. So they could be working on a group project, they could be listening into lectures, they could be doing a primary survey, they could be out on field trips and field studies, they could be doing experiments in the lab, or they could just be researching in the library and finding out that information through textbooks. But making sure that they've got a coherent plan to their research really helps them look at where they're going and what they're doing. It's also very much about all the things that they can get their hands on as well. So we talked about YouTube videos and we talked about journals, news articles, TV programs. So, you know, a lot of our science students are using a lot of David Attenborough's stuff at the moment to bring up their biological and environmental research. And to back their points up. You know, he's made some very famous quotes recently, and they might be using those to back up their research. It could be that they're looking at podcasts. They're becoming more and more popular. We have one for teachers. So it's well worth looking and seeing if there's a podcast or series that highlights the themes you're looking at. It could be websites, books, photographs and artwork can still be used if they highlight a particular perspective. Ebooks and magazines we've talked about a little bit more. So highlighting what you can use and the breadth of information that's out there is probably a really great way of finding the research and resources that you need. Just a few hints and tips, not just from our students, but from our lecturers and the team as well. These are ways of identifying what you're looking for on, say, Google platforms or other search engines. So avoiding using a question you probably already know, so instead using a stated term, okay, may find you more articles on a particular subject. Putting quotation marks around your phrase will search using only that phrase. It won't be a single word, it won't break them up individually, it will just look for that phrase in the text. Using more query terms to get more specific results. So if you're looking at Java, you could be looking at programming, or you could be looking at coffee. So making sure you're very specific about the terms that you're using. Google, you can use the minus sign to remove things that you don't want to look at. So studies on schizophrenia minus American will give you other countries' perspectives on schizophrenia, for example. Excluding terms using the not word in capital letters is also a way of making sure you don't have that phrase included in the work that you're doing. So I will let you, do any of you want to take a picture of that on mobile phones rather than writing, scribbling loads of notes? Will that be more helpful? Okay. Got it? Okay, all good? Lovely. Okay, so when you're researching your different points, being critical about it is really key. You need to look at whether it's relevant to what you're doing, because quite often you start reading something, you find it interesting, and all of a sudden it's not about the project that you were originally doing, and a lot of our students talk about that. Also, you need to look and check if there's a bias, all right, and whether that bias is concluding with your outcomes, because if it's not, it might be a good way of highlighting a different opinion. If not, it might not be helping your research project. Okay, I'm going to go. All right, so I've got some hints and tips from our students as we work our way through the program. So to start with, a number of our students talk about rereading their notes as soon as you can and explain to yourself what you have written. Now, what they mean by that is quite often you sit in lectures, as you guys are doing now, and you're writing and jotting down notes as we work through. Okay, that's great, and that's exactly what you should be doing, especially in lectures at university. Some of our students use dictaphones if the lecturer is happy to do that. Some of them just use the online presentation tools to see what has been, talked about during the lecture. But generally, you'll often find that a lot of our students take their notes home, okay, and they put them to one side, and then 8 weeks later, when they're starting to write their research projects, they go back to those notes. Now, I don't know if they're like you or you guys are like me, but quite often I don't remember why I wrote that particular word or that particular phrase, probably about 10 minutes after the lecture. So what they're suggesting is if you go back and read it there and then, highlight things that you thought were really important, put extra notes in that explain why you put a particular term down or a particular note down. It makes it easier 8 weeks on to go back over those notes and say, this is why I wrote that point down. So it's probably a good way of making sure your notes are coherent. Okay. Any of you really big highlighter fans? I know I am. I use far too many colours on the page when I'm reading through text and stuff. Okay, this wasn't actually a picture from one of our students, but she did actually talk about using this system. She said she labelled both her post-it notes and her tabs when she was reading through textbooks or reading through her notes, and she labelled her highlighters so that she could work out what the colour schemes were as she worked through her particular text. So finding new ways to make sure you've highlighted all the arguments behind what you're doing might be a good way of making sure you've got the right things. It might be worth rereading it again and using a new colour to find the things that you missed at the start. Okay, so just another perspective on using colour within your notes and your textbooks. When it comes to taking notes, a lot of our students talk about projects they did in college, like their EPQ, or for you guys, the Welsh Back. And they talk about why they started note-taking in the first place. And sometimes it helps to go back to that original point. It could be that you are looking to select notes to help you understand, notes to help you remember, or you're just selecting pieces of information that are important to you. So when you're going through their notes, highlighting or having a look back over it and making sure you've got the notes you need. I often find myself copying down all the words on a slide rather than listening to what the lecturer is saying. And listening to the lecturer means that you are getting all of the information they're trying to impart on you, especially if they've just put a big picture on the slide and you don't know what they're trying to highlight. So listening and making sure you've got notes on what's being said, as much as notes that are on the board, can be a really key point to what you're doing. When it comes to finishing off a project or finishing off a research piece, a lot of our students talk about how difficult they found referencing in their first year. So you guys know what I mean by referencing in terms of putting a book list or a source list at the end of your projects to make sure you've got all the pieces of information. Now, the thing about university is they don't all use the same one. The main one is often Harvard referencing, okay? And I'll show you an example of Harvard referencing shortly. However, when it comes to referencing, you can use any one of these 5, oh, Harvard's just disappeared, but the other 4 are here, okay? And each lecturer could work to a different referencing system. So it's very important to work out what the referencing system is for your lecturer, but also the referencing system of your textbooks to make sure that you're understanding how they're making it clear. So to give you an example of a Harvard referencing system, obviously they've put in the authors and the dates, and then it relates to the book list at the end of the referencing system. So making sure you've got that pinned down and you understand the different referencing system is really key to what you're trying to achieve. Okay. One of the things that Emily talks about is how, for example, you need to be critical and make criticisms count when you're being critical. What we're trying to say is a lot of our students struggle with academic language, making sure they understand either what the question is asking or the terms that they are using within the text to make themselves sound like an academic, because far more often than not, we are writing how we speak and speaking how we write these days, okay? And it could be a very different system that you're looking into. So to give you an example, these are all terms that might come up when you're thinking about a question. So, for example, you could be looking to, analyse or examine. It could be that you've been asked to summarise a piece of text or discuss it, okay? The difference with those might be an analysis or an examination is your personal opinion. You might be asked to critique it or critically evaluate it. Okay, it was something I learned in my first year when I was studying, was that a lot of the essays I was being asked to write and the titles I was writing essays on said something along the lines of, understanding this text means blah, 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 blah. Analyse the points. And people would say to me, you're not being critical, you're not analysing, because I was too much summarising or explaining. But no one explained to me that analyse or critically evaluate meant that I was having to write my own opinion, okay? So it was my understanding of what had happened. It wasn't a summary of what had happened. It wasn't an explanation of what had happened. It was my opinion on it. So understanding the words that we are using as part of the questions is really important, and understanding how to break them down can help first-year students understand the questions that they're being asked. Okay, so a lot of our students talk about not accessing the support that was available to them until they got to their 3rd year. So in your first year, and in fact every year of university, you have these people and these resources available to you at most universities. They may be called slightly different things, but they are there. Academic advisors mimic a tutor at college, okay, but they will have more understanding of your subject area because you are predominantly studying one. So they will have an understanding and an overarching help for you. The lecturers will know each of your modules and topics. Your course mates are there to pick up anything you're not quite sure of. So use them even now to understand the topics that you're not quite getting. You know, it could be that one topic you don't quite get, but your best mate completely gets that one and doesn't get something else. Do a swap. Find out the information. Don't struggle. Push to find out the information from different people. Revision classes and revision workshops come up before exams every year, and you might use them and you might not use them. But if you've got one question that is really eating you, getting into that revision session and asking a teacher might be the really good way of finding out what you need and what your topic is. And then going back to that library resource, those textbooks are there, those journals are there, those ebooks are there to help you understand better what you're looking at. Okay, so how can you go about getting some of these skills right now? So obviously you've sat in here and I've talked about some of these skills. It could be that you also take part in a research project now, especially if you're taking things like, oh, this one's bounced to EPQ, Welsh Back. We do Welsh Back, you guys do Welsh Back rather than EPQ. Okay, so when it comes to Welsh Back, you guys have to do an individual project as part of it. Okay, if you take that offer up, then obviously you've already done a piece of independent learning, and so many of our students talk about their timetabling work because of the things like EPQ and the Welsh Back. It could be that you are taking up the offer of tasters that are available at universities. So they could be one-day lecture series, could be a two-day event where you get to stay on a campus and have a look at the university, but it's based around the subject that you want to study. Often these are free and they're offered by universities, so get online and have a look and see what extra opportunities there are, both to bolster personal statements and to give you a better understanding of the subjects you want to study. When it comes to extra reading and extra reading lists, the university ones are often published, so have a look at university ones. But it could be that libraries have reading lists based on particular subjects, so have a look at those. Gaining work experience in areas that you want to work in, or attending a summer school over a summer break, which will give you an extended period at a university or college, may help you bolster and gain those skills that put you ahead for your first year. So it may be worth having a look and seeing if any of those opportunities are available to you. Okay, I'm going to skip that one because you guys know most about the EPQ and you know why we look at it. So when it comes to the Welsh Back, we look at lots of different areas. And for some, the UCAS tariff points will be there to help you and pick you up with additional qualifications and results. For us over at UEA, we also offer a scholarship that's available for students who have taken part in a research project. So this gets students, so if you're looking for an A in your, I believe it's your individual project section of your skills certificate, okay, if you've got an A, you've got the equivalent of 3 Bs at A level, and if you have a look at our research themes, one of your projects links to a research theme, we would offer you £1,000 for the first 3 years of your course each year to help you with your living costs, okay, and any research and extra work that you need to do. So that money is there to support our students, so that tops up on top of, you know, the work that you're getting for the Welsh Back or the EPQ. So it may be a project that you want to get involved in. Okay. We wrote a study skills booklet to support students doing additional projects like the EPQ or like the Welsh Baccalaureate. So if you're thinking that you might want to get hold of that, if you go onto the teachers pages of our webpage, there's a link at the bottom that says free ebook for the extended project qualification. If you want to take a picture of this one so you don't have to go Googling quite so rapidly, you're more than welcome. If not, it's there as an ebook, so just Google the teachers pages on our website. Okay. So we talked about taster days and extra support summer schools. All of ours are highlighted on our university's tasters page on our web pages. So have a look and see what we've got on offer. If you don't want to travel quite as far as Norwich, most universities also offer summer school and taster programs. So look for one closer to home. At least it will give you an experience of what teaching is like and what subjects will be like at university. I'm going to hang around for a little bit longer, so if anybody's got any questions for me, you're more than welcome. But if you just want to escape this very warm room, thank you for your time.